Hi, way cool friends and family, Chef Mary here, and I'm super excited to show you guys today how to make the foods in our comfort food kit. This comfort food kit was a great kit that came with all sorts of fun things, how to make Minnesota wild rice soup, artisan bread, and some delicious chocolate snack cake. I'm going to show you guys how to make the snack cake right now. We gave you just about everything you needed for this, with the exception of a cup of water and a half a teaspoon of salt. And so if you want to go and grab those right now, otherwise I got everything else laid out here ready to go. We're gonna actually make this cake inside of this pan. This cake recipe is so delicious. It's fluffy, it's chocolatey, and it's like the perfect end to a wonderful comfort meal that you guys are gonna be making today. So let's get started. All right, first thing we're gonna do is, I've got my pan here ready to go. You don't even need to spray this with anything, which is amazing. So grab your cake pan, and then what we're gonna do is we're gonna add in all of our dry ingredients. And so I'm gonna measure out, and I have measured out, 1.25 cups of all-purpose flour. So we're gonna go ahead and throw that into the pan. And then to that, we're gonna add our pre-measured out packet of sugar and dump that on top. Then we've got 5 tablespoons of cocoa powder to make this super yummy and chocolatey. And we're gonna dump that on top of our other dry ingredients. A little pouch of baking soda, and that's gonna help lift the cake because this cake doesn't even have eggs in it. So the baking soda is very important that we get all of this out of this little pouch because that's what's gonna help lift the cake in the oven. So I'm gonna sprinkle that on top as well and give it a little shake here. I'm also gonna add the little bit of salt in there and sprinkle that on top. All right, once you have all your dry ingredients in here, the next thing that's very important is that we incorporate them all in together. And so I'm gonna grab a little whisk, very little, very cute, and I'm just gonna start to stir this in. And in your directions, it says to stir it up until it is a uniform color. And really what that means is that if it all looks about the same color, it means that all the cocoa powder has been mixed in, all the flour is mixed in, all the baking soda is mixed in, and we'll make sure that we have super chocolatey piece in every piece of cake that we make today. So I'm just gonna keep stirring that up. And if there's any kind of little lumps, you can actually use your fingers to kind of smush those and make sure that that is all taken care of. I also have a handy spatula nearby, so that if I need to get into the corners a little bit more, I can grab my spatula and do that as well, which I'm gonna do right now. I'm just gonna take it, I'm gonna scrape around the edges and kind of flip it toward the center just to make sure that that is all mixed in very well. Okay, we have our dry ingredients done. It's looking uniform in color inside of our cake pan. I love this recipe because you don't have to get any extra dishes dirty. You can make it right inside of the pan. I'm gonna dig a little bit in the center here and just kind of dig out a little bowl inside of a bowl so that we can add our wet ingredients right inside of this pan as well. So the first thing I'm gonna grab is I'm gonna grab 1 cup of water and pour that into the center. And then to that, I'm gonna add 1/3 cup of vegetable oil. So in your kit, you actually received vegetable oil in a bottle. You wanna measure out 1/3 cup of that and pour that in the center with the water. We're also going to add the cup that is labeled vanilla and vinegar for the cake because we're gonna put the vanilla and vinegar inside of our cake, and we're gonna dump that in too. Give it a little shake there, make sure we get all the vanilla in. Then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my whisk again, and I'm just gonna start gently incorporating the wet and dry ingredients together and stirring that up to make sure that it's all mixed in really well. The other thing that your recipe says is to use your spatula again to get the corners so that we can get all of this stirred in. And I think that anytime that you're making a cake, it's very important to make sure that everything is incorporated, but not over stir it. And so once it all looks like it's all wet and mixed in here, I'm gonna grab my spatula and grab the corners, turning my pan here as I go to make sure I get all of the dry stuff mixed in. All right. Again, this cake doesn't use any eggs, and so don't think that we forgot the eggs or they're not in the recipe. It's always a great idea anytime that you're baking to not just read through the ingredients, but to read through the directions before you start baking, because you'll notice maybe there's something in the order that we're doing things that is different than a regular cake recipe that you're making, or you'll discover that maybe we put something in, maybe not in the sequence that you're used to putting it in. So anytime you're baking, make sure you read not just the ingredients, but the directions. That's a hard one to learn because I am an ingredients reader and not a directions reader, self-admitted. And so I had to teach myself to be really, really diligent, especially when baking, to make sure that I read all of the directions all the way through. And it just makes baking a little bit easier for me. Okay, so it looks pretty good. Grab my spatula, scrape down the sides. All right, and then the last thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab just a little damp paper towel that I have over here, and I'm gonna take it, I'm gonna wipe off the sides of the pan before we pop that into the oven. Our oven is preheated to 325 degrees. That's actually not that hot for a cake, but it is just the right temperature so that we can pop this in and do this. Now this is a super cool trick that I actually learned from both my mom and my grandma, because if you do not wipe off the edges of the pan and you leave the cake batter on there, what'll happen is that part of the cake batter obviously gets really, really hot really, really fast, and then that part will actually burn on the cake. And so we wanna just make sure that we get that all cleaned off and cleaned ready to go. All right, we're gonna pop this in the oven and we are going to bake it until it is spongy, which takes about 25 to 30 minutes. Again, that's gonna depend on your oven. What I like to do is always halfway through baking is I take with pot holders and I just spin the cake halfway around 180 degrees to make sure that both sides of the cake are cooking evenly in the oven. And if possible, you wanna always bake on the center rack of your oven so that you get the most even heat from the top and the bottom of your oven as well. All right, we're gonna pop this in the oven and we're gonna come back and show you our finished chocolate cake and show you how to decorate it. Oh, you'll notice in your kit, you also have a packet of chocolate chips to just kind of put this cake over the top. This is optional, but I mean, it's chocolate chips, so we're gonna, of course, add them. I'm gonna take and open up my packet of chocolate chips, pour them into my hand, and then I'm just gonna let them fall all over the top of the cake. And I'm gonna just kind of do it a little bit above, so it's pretty random. And that's just gonna give it a little bit of extra chocolatiness when it comes out of the oven. All right, we'll come back to baked chocolate cake. Hi, we're back and our cake is finished. So we baked this for about 30 minutes in our oven. You'll notice that the cake, when it is done, and I cooled it too, that's why I can hold it, is bouncy to the touch. We stuck a toothpick in it, it came out clean, and it's just starting to pull away from the edges of the cake pan a little bit. And you can see our little sunken chocolate chips are floating around in there too for an extra little tasty chocolate pop. All right, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna finish off our cake. So do let your cake cool a little bit, because if you put on the powdered sugar and the cake is too hot, what happens is the powdered sugar kind of just like melts and gets kind of goopy, and that's okay. It kind of turns into an icing actually, if you just can't resist the chocolate cake. But you've got a cute little powdered sugar shaker inside of your kit. And so what we're gonna do now is I'm gonna just take, and you can add as much or as little powdered sugar on top of that cake as you like. And so I'm just gonna sprinkle that all over the top. I still just cannot get over that we just made a cake inside of a pan and baked it inside the pan. No extra dishes were needed. That's so cool. And so I'm gonna take it, I'm gonna add that all over the top here and shake it. All right, some people love powdered sugar, some people can't stand powdered sugar, and so I'll leave that up to you. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab a nice metal spatula, and I like using a metal spatula just because it cuts through the cake a little bit cleaner than a rubber spatula does. You could also use a butter knife, that would work too, and a fork. And we're gonna take, and I'm just gonna go around all 4 edges here of our cake and loosen that up. The other thing is that once you've tried this cake, it may become your go-to chocolate cake. You could certainly take this and you could add frosting to it. You could bake it in a couple smaller round cake pans and turn it into a layered birthday cake as well. The texture of this cake, I'll show you here in a second, is really, really nice and rich and dense. I'm gonna lift that one up and get that out of there here. The first piece is always the trickiest. I'm always the one who eats the first piece because I don't care if it looks messy. I just like that it's chocolate cake. And I'm gonna lift that out so you can see it's a nice thick cake. And that is the baking soda that was in there that allowed that to rise. We're gonna sit that there. And, oh my goodness, fresh chocolate cake. So good. Oh, I dare you not to eat the whole pan. So good. Actually, don't eat the whole pan. Save some, share some with your family. But that is our chocolate cake for our Comfort Cakes kit. Enjoy delicious dessert.